Welcome to Media Empires, where we sit down with the most influential media creators right now to learn exactly how they built their empires. Our aim is to extract the secrets of top-tier podcasters, newsletter authors, and media creators who are breaking the old rules for media success. Whether you're looking to start your own empire or simply curious about the nuts and bolts behind media businesses, you'll find valuable insights and tactics in each episode. Grab your headphones, let's dive in. In this week's episode, I'm joined by Greg Raiten, co-founder of The Suite, a community-based platform for top C-suite executives. In this conversation, we discuss the evolution of The Suite as a profitable business, strategies for community growth, and plans for future expansions into other C-suite roles. Greg, welcome to Media Empires. Excited to have you on.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Good to be here.
So this fits in because we're doing a series on community businesses, on membership businesses, on network businesses. We've covered a lot of people who run more traditional media companies, whether it's newsletters or podcast businesses. But we're seeing a lot of sort of interplay between those two, where creators are not just creating content, but they're also creating community. And then we saw with Sam Parr and Hampton, and of course YPO, and now with the Suite, what you guys are putting together is pretty amazing. So excited to get under the hood a bit. Why don't you give the high level of how this came together, and when you realized, hey, this is actually a big business opportunity.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I am a former lawyer. I was at a couple different law firms working as, outside counsel, working mostly with startups. And then I went in-house as general counsel in 2013, back when I was living in the Bay Area at the time. So I was GC of 500 startups, where Stu and I met. Can't believe it's been that long. So this was something that was my first GC role. I ended up joining another fund after that called First Mark Capital in New York, and was there for about 5 years. And this was really a side project I started. My co-founder Kieran and I were both GCs, and I think it's a really challenging job. I think I've since learned that this is true of all C-suite functions in a lot of ways, but it was something that we both kind of had stepped into the seat, and we're suddenly finding ourselves dealing with all sorts of questions that we didn't know the answers to. And really sort of, when I met Kieran, we had started talking about this, sharing all these war stories, and realizing like, hey, we're all kind of going through a lot of the same things, and a lot of these things aren't actually like confidential or like strategic that you can't really talk about with others. There's a lot of value in sharing best practices with peers. So we started doing a dinner series in New York and just got other GCs together, really, really curated, very like all were like venture-backed startups or venture funds. And that, seemed to resonate with folks. We would do a couple in New York, and it expanded to Boston and the Bay Area, and really kind of took off as this side project that, takes a lot of time and a lot of sweat equity, a lot of love, but we really enjoyed doing it. We didn't have a business model. It wasn't something we started as a company, and it kind of evolved into that over time.
Take us through that evolution.
Yeah. So this was 2015. We did our first lunch. Actually, it was like a lunch at a WeWork in 2015. And the New York tech ecosystem at the time was like pretty, like it was taking off. Like you could sort of like see the early signs of it, but it was definitely nothing like the Bay Area, nothing like it is today. But we were able to get like, some incredible names there of people. And I think that really like helped grow it in the early days. But as that, that sort of like nights and weekends type thing always takes a ton of your time. I think what we continued to see, like we kept hitting these inflection points where it was either like, we need to figure out a way to scale ourselves and do more, or we need to like scale this back. And like every time we like came up to something, I was like, all right, well, this is becoming a lot. Like, hey, it was like we're starting to travel, like we're going to San Francisco. Like, how do we pay for that? So we sort of created a sponsorship model where we would have law firms, not just like, cover the bill to come have lunch with general counsels, but like we'd add a little bit of margin that would pay for travel and whatnot. And then we hired our first employee before either one of us went full time. But then we kept kind of like, outgrowing that phase. And it really came down around like 2017, 2018. We had about probably 500-600 members at the time, and it was free. We were just making money by sponsorships. And that was a big inflection point for us. We were like, look, like a lot of members were actually telling us, you're adding a ton of value. Like you should charge us here. Like, why is this free? You should charge. So we kind of launched in 2018. We launched a paid membership model. It was voluntary at the time. We didn't We didn't require our members to pay. We just asked them if you want to. It was $500 a year. We had a really good conversion rate of those like members that started paying. And then we, suddenly had two revenue streams. We had sponsorship, we had membership. And, we really just saw like this opportunity to grow this and really saw that there was more than just a side project here. So we both went full time right around 2017, 2018, or sorry, 2018, 2019, right after we had launched that paid model, and then started growing a team. Obviously, COVID hit right in the middle of that. So we were very much like a live events business at the time, and COVID helped us really pivot and shape that into something different. But that was kind of the organic evolution as to how we created the revenue model and started, a business behind it.
And you guys raised money for this?
Not raise money. It's been
Oh wow,
bootstrapped.
totally bootstrapped. So yeah, walk us through what is the business vision for, if everything goes according to plan or to aspiration, what does the suite look like?
Yeah. So that first community, we called it Tech GC. So very much, for general counsels, I think when both Kira and I around the 2018, 2019 mark, when we started thinking about like, hey, is there a big business here? What we really started thinking about was like, there was, one, the question was, is there a business here? And then two is like, what is it? So we started thinking then it was like, there were kind of two pretty obvious paths. Like either we grow vertically within legal, and this is just a really impactful legal community. And we can go everything from law school to law firms to, paralegals and legal ops, all of the legal ecosystem and just dominate that. Or we thought we could grow horizontally and that this is, hey, like we discovered an interesting niche for lawyers, but like I was kind of alluded to before, it's like, this isn't a lawyer problem. This is really a C-suite problem. And what we started realizing is that, if you're the C-suite executive at your company, whatever function you run, CFO, CMO, CTO, like you're the one, the buck stops with you. Everyone, all of your peers, your fellow C-suite executives, as well as the board, like they're looking to you to solve all the answers within your department. And you've got a bunch of people on your team, you've got your colleagues, but like, where do you turn when you have questions and you're trying to figure that out? So we started thinking that this could be a C-suite, platform where we have a series of communities that are C-suite communities. I think there's a lot of really, really awesome communities out there. A lot of people approaching this in different ways, a lot that we, sort of are starting to maybe compete with or just sit alongside in various ways and see how they build their models. But for us, like, we thought about this as bespoke C-suite communities, all of them living under this umbrella that we eventually formed called the Suite. And the Suite is now our company. It's something we launched, on top of TechGC in 2021. And the plan for this was to build this family of communities that sort of are tangential, like sit parallel to each other and have some synergies, but are separate. They're not one big community. So that's kind of our vision is really, building these bespoke C-suite communities.
It's sort of like the YPO, but for the C-suite. Is that the right analogy?
Yeah, I feel like YPO is like the grandfather of all of these models, right? And YPO is a fantastic community. I think a lot of spun out of that, but yeah, that's sort of similar. I think we also, I'm not a member of YPO. I've talked to lots of people that are. I think YPO is fantastic, adds a ton of value. They've got a very unique approach to building community. And one of the knocks I hear sometimes on YPO is that it's not as curated as it could be, like as in maybe it's not just tech or it's not just high growth companies, or, a lot of it depends on that sort of local chapter and pod that you're in. So we're trying to be a little bit more curated than that, I would say.
Yeah. And so 5 to 10 years from now is the hope. Basically, you have like a dozen or so sort of communities that are each doing 10 or tens of millions of dollars of revenue, or what's the right way to think about it? From a combination of subscription plus other business models?
Yeah, I think that's right. So, I mean, we look at this as, a handful, whatever this is, 5 to 10, at least core C-suite level communities. So we're kind of trying to do both. Like I mentioned before, it's like vertical or horizontal. Our sharp tip of the spear is like thinking about C-suite first and tech first. So we think about building these C-suite communities, but then once we've got a really good C-suite ecosystem, we go down and build communities for their teams. But again, keeping those curated. So thinking about, let's say whatever, 5 years from now, we've got maybe 5 to 10 of these C-suite communities with team communities under them. And it's a combination of our communities are like offline and online communities. So we do events Like, I think, we can get into this more, but I feel like people are approaching this very differently in like the value props for what they give their members, whether it's education, events, something in between. But then we've also built a member platform. So we made that conscious decision about 4 or 5 years ago that we were going to build this community on top of our own technology. You know, I think people use Slack, people use other white label platforms out there. We sort of made that choice that this was something we want to invest a lot in. So we see that as being also a big driver. Like you can aggregate that, like you could have a really curated community, but that data can actually be something that's impactful for a wider audience.
And when you say the teams under them, are you saying you have CFO communities, but then like VP of finance or, or like people they employ, or how does that work?
Yeah, exactly right. So in legal now, so Tech GC was the community. It has evolved to be called the L Suite under our broader umbrella of the suite. And the L Suite has what we call like 5 peer networks. So one of them is GC level. There's actually 3 GC level, one for private companies, public companies, venture funds. And then there's a deputy community underneath that. So for these are like number twos, like senior executives, they've got, 10 years plus of experience. They lead teams of 2 plus. And then there's a council community for, the more junior rising people on the team. And then the same thing has started to happen on the F suite. We've got about 800 members now on the CFO side. We created a VP of finance community. So, at some point we might create a controller or FP&A type communities, but really keeping those curated based on seniority and job function.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And how have you, we'll go back to that. How have you thought about business model and product, right? So as you mentioned, there are different, companies that offer, like Reforge, for example, is really heavy on the education side, and others are heavy on the, meet in person and share your feelings, these sort of group therapy, group coaching side. How have you thought about what is the right product that you want to be offering these people, or what is the main value prop that you get to that? And then we'll get into what's the best way to make money.
Yeah. So we think about it's kind of like two things that are both related, but it's how do we connect you to your closest peers? So again, closest peers is very much a curation function. So it is like closest peers to me can mean different things depending on the question. And that's where we get into like the second value prop that we have is, what we're trying to say is like, we're helping you make better, faster decisions. So this is really like focused on performance. It's not just like, how do I be a better leader or, or sort of the touchy feely, like, let me share vulnerabilities. All of that is part of it. Like that is a big part of what we do, help you be a better leader. Certainly a big part of it is sharing vulnerabilities and getting feedback on that and growing as a person. But like our sort of wedge here is like really making you better at your job. And the job that you're doing is, you're a CFO or you're a general counsel. So we're connecting you with other people that are doing that same job function. And then the closest peers really depends on the type of question, right? So our vision here is, let's say you're a pre-IPO company. Maybe you want to talk to other CFOs that are pre-IPO. Maybe ideally you want to talk to a couple that have also taken a company public, right? A few people ahead of you. Maybe you're dealing with, some challenge of scaling a department. You want to talk to someone who scaled a department before, or you want to talk to someone at a company of 1,000 plus because you're dealing with a large company problem. Or I'm in crypto and I want to talk to someone at the same, industry because it's an industry-based problem. So closest peers really depends on the question that you were asking. And for us, it's like, how do we create those, what we call like dynamic brain trusts? So you can tap into a brain trust of the right people at the right time to help answer those questions.
So let's say I'm a GC at a 100-person company. How do I interface with the L suite? There are opportunities for me to go to events and meet people at my level. There's some sort of, you have a platform that I can ask questions or see frequently asked questions. Yeah, say more about how the engagement model looks like.
Yeah, all of those things. So basically we, just taking you through the full member experience, right? So a member joins, there is an annual membership fee. There's one fee. Everything that we do then is included as part of that. So for the legal community, we run about 300 events a year for the L suite. You'll get invited to a bunch of those, not all of them. Some of them are, just depending on your demographic. But of those events, they are everything from small group roundtable dinners. So these are like 12 to 15 GCs together with a sponsor of some sort. So it's like a law firm or a legal tech platform, insurance, something like that. And we do those at local restaurants. So we'll rent out like a private room at a really nice restaurant. These are sort of like really fun, really kind of like the small group experiences where people share like real war stories and like get a little bit more vulnerable. They feel in a safe space. So that's like the bread and butter of like the vast majority by number of the events we do. And then we do a lot of virtual events. So, webinars and virtual small group experiences. And then we run a number of conferences. And the conferences take a couple different forms. So there's like broad conferences where it's open to the whole GC community. And then we do a conference in San Francisco called the Full Stack GC Conference. That'll have like 300 plus GCs there, but no curation around that. Besides that, it's just all general counsel. Then we do a lot of conferences that are based on different demographics. So we have like next week, I'll be in Montreal. We're doing our crypto offsite. So this is super curated, 50 GCs at the top crypto companies. We do this as a 3-day event every year in a different place. We do the same thing for digital health, for fintech, for SaaS. So we have like industry-based offsites. We have seniority-based conferences, like you have to be a GC for 10 plus years, like for most senior members. We have deep dives on different like transactions. So in a few weeks, we're doing our AI conference. So this is, sort of going deep into AI tech. We have an IPO conference. We have an M&A conference. The members get invited to all of those, and these are like curated experiences. They have roundtables. All of them have small group events, and then they have main stage. So educational content. That's kind of one big pillar of our community is the events. And then the second pillar is the platform. So this is where people interact on a daily basis, sharing questions, asking, for feedback on different transactions they might be going through, but they're also sharing, who's the best employment lawyer, or I need a contract management platform. Which one do you use and why? A lot of the events that we do are recorded. So there's a pretty large library of past materials. So you can look through videos. Lawyers have to get what's called CLE credit, continuing legal education credit. So as part of that, every session that you attend has to have substantive backups, like written materials. So like forums or, some sort of precedent or educational article. So all of that lives on our platform, really searchable. And, there's also, you can DM members and follow members, that type of thing. So those are kind of the two big value props of membership. And like I said, the events are all free. So we don't like charge members to come to events. That's included as part of their membership, which is a bit of a different model, I think, than some other event tech companies.
Yeah. And is the price the same for everybody?
The price depends on it's the same for all GCs or for all deputies.
And is it 5,000? Is it 10,000? Is it?
It's 2,500 a year now for general counsels, and then 1,250 for deputy and counsel. And same on the CFO side.
Cool. And is the online experience something like a forum? Is it more of a chat, or what is the online experience?
Yeah, it's kind of a combination, I'd say, of like Reddit and LinkedIn and Yelp, for like lack of like Yelp. The Yelp one's a little bit of a weird analogy, but meaning there's forums. So it's like very like Reddit based forum where people are asking questions. There is like the LinkedIn experience, like, you can see other members, connect with them, follow them. And then the Yelp is a big part of this community is getting referrals or recommendations. So people, like I said, will ask, who's the best lawyer for X? What's the best contract management platform? All of that is sort of like tagged and separated out. So you can go see, whatever it is, Ironclad has been recommended 100 times. And I can see the context of what has been recommended, like within a thread, who recommended it, what they said about it, all of that type of thing. So it's not like a 5-star rating type thing, but it's more of like a thumbs up, thumbs down, and why.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And the sponsors, they pay for event access and some sort of community engagement.
Yeah. Yeah. We say they pay for its thought leadership. So this has just been something like that's been very organic for us as we started this community, and we really pushed on this hard, is that all of our sponsors, like, we don't sell ads. We don't sell the ability to just slap your logo on an event. Like, it's about coming and attending and being a thought leader at that event. And we don't allow anyone to just come in and present on their product. So whether you're, a SaaS product or a law firm, we're going to pair you with a member, and we're going to make sure that, this is about really practical content for in-house folks. So, this is maybe a little bit more unique to the legal world, but if you let a law firm just come in and like present, they're going to present in a way that I think is is much more like suitable for outside counsel or suitable. Like it's not like that practical in-house lens that we find that GCs wanted to hear. And that was just something my co-founder and we were building this from the start. Like we were just seeing that, like law firms do all these webinars themselves, but like they're not really geared towards what in-house counsel care about. So we sort of push a lot on that. And then for vendors too, though, if you're, let's say you're a contract management platform, we're not going to let you come in and lead an event on contracting because we find that, that ends up just being very salesy, even though maybe you don't intend it to be. Like that's how it comes off. And really this type of community, like the C-suite is not here to be sold to. They're being sold to all over the place. They're here to build relationships and they're here to learn.
We'll get back to the conversation in a moment after a word from our sponsor. Real talk. Most talent leaders haven't yet cracked how to leverage AI for meaningful impact on their hiring processes and business goals. But the leaders who are effectively using AI to transform their recruiting team's efficiency and quality use MetaView. MetaView is the AI assistant for the interview process. Their AI records and transcribes hiring conversations, like intakes, interviews, and debriefs, then provides perfectly summarized notes of everything that was discussed. That means your people can focus on creating a human connection with candidates during calls and save time on the busy work of cleaning up notes after every interview. But it's so much more than just a time saver, because perfect notes means perfect data. For every candidate and every pipeline, hiring teams can make confident, informed decisions, and talent leaders can finally take control of the interview process. Join forward-thinking talent leaders at high-performing organizations like Brex, HelloFresh, and Quora, and check out MetaView. Head over to metaview.ai/heretics to talk to one of MetaView's product experts or get started for free. You'll be up, running, and AI-enabled in minutes.
Do you make more revenue from the subscription or from the sponsorship?
Today, it's more from the sponsorship. Yeah. So we started by, sponsorship was part of the model from close to day one. I mean, the very, very early days, it was just like pays to the bill of, we'll do it at a restaurant. And then we started sort of, like I said, adding a little revenue. So sponsorship was like 100% for a while. And then membership has slowly been eclipsing, but it's still a little bit more sponsorship.
Yeah. And how do you do the thought leadership for them?
How do the sponsors come in and do thought?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we, like all of the conferences that we run, all of the events that we run have some sort of subject associated with it. So we'll come in and it's usually some combination of either we know what our members want to hear. And this is one of the beauties of like having the platform. We see what is top of mind, right? It's like we know exactly what they care about, what they want to hear about, the questions that they have that are top of mind. But then obviously, like all of the law firms and vendors that we partner with are experts in this ecosystem too, and they know what their clients want to hear. So we have some combination of like, is there something in particular you're hearing that, or did you, whatever, you just got this new partner that used to be an SEC commissioner and like that person has really unique experience or something like that. And we'll come to, topics together that we realize like, all right, this is really good for the community. And then it's, what's the best format? Is that best at a conference? Is that best at a webinar, dinner, that?
And do you think a few years from now, the product will look similar in that you'll be doing, for example, so many events? It feels like events are expensive and you don't always know if people are going to come and there's upfront cost. Like, yeah, how do you think about that?
That's a good question. So I'd say events are such a core part of a community. It is just like, online communities have a lot of value. I think they're great, but it's really like you have to build relationships with people. You have to build that trust. And once we'll do like, I'll like just use this example, right? Like we do this crypto conference. We've been doing that. This will be our third year running it. We probably have the largest crypto community for lawyers, but they are so active on this. Like they have formed incredible relationships through our events, probably other events that they go to. And like that translates into the discussions on the platform because they know each other and they trust each other. They're willing to, ask questions and share advice on the platform. So I think events will always be a big part of it, but they are expensive. They are hard to run. One of the other conscious decisions that we've made that I think has been a little different than other communities is that we centralize and run all events ourselves. So we don't have like a franchise model. There's not like a local chapter president that can just pop up an event in their community. And I think there's a lot of value to doing it that way. But what we found is if you do that, you can't control the quality. So it's exactly like you said, like maybe someone's doing a happy hour in Seattle and like two people come to that. And like, that's a really bad experience, right? If everyone's super busy. If I come to a happy hour and two people are there, I'm never coming back. So we realized we got to centralize that and that's hard, but it also means like we're scaling those things slower than we otherwise would to maintain quality.
And so if you say, hey, we're going to do a dinner in Seattle or New York or something, and only 4 people RSVP or something, are you saying, hey, we're now going to reschedule so that we can make sure we get more people, or do you just say, hey, this is a small event, or how do you think about that?
It's pretty rare that we run into that because we just like sort of have a process and we know how to do this now. But yeah, I mean, it does happen from time to time. So it'll be, anything from like we might see that, hey, we thought this topic was going to resonate, but for whatever reason it doesn't. So like we're just going to punt that and we'll do a different topic a little bit later. Or, we've had scheduling conflicts where we're just like, oh, we didn't realize there was this like local thing happening. And so we need to move it. But we'll get ahead of those and we'll change it.
Yeah, and the process to avoid that is you basically are making sure that the topic is of interest and that the date people are interested in coming before you'll even host event, or what is the process to make sure that people are.
Yeah. I mean, we have like an invite process that we know. I mean, we know our attrition rate, really well at this point. We track all of this. We have a lot of data around it. We know what types of topics hit more. We know how big our community is in different areas. So how many events calibrate there. But I mean, it all comes down to like getting ahead of this stuff. Like if you're, whatever X days out and you don't have Y number, then we're just going to push that event or we're going to, put an effort on to get more.
How many lawyers, for example, are in your like? How big is your L Suite community, and what is the total TAM of your like? What is your saturation rate of how many people could potentially be in your L Suite community, for example, your oldest one?
So right now we've got 4,100, a little more than 4,100 lawyers in the legal community in the L Suite. And we've got about, we have a CFO community. We have around 750 CFOs in that community. I mean, the total TAM, so depending sort of where we stay and sit, but like there are, something like 150,000 in-house counsel in the United States. So I mean, that includes broad companies. I mean, like our sweet spot, like I said, is tech. I mean, I think tech is a loose term. Like we've grown out of that. It's more like high growth companies, like what you think of as venture backed or private equity backed companies. How many of those are within this 150? I don't know, but I think a large amount of them, are within that sweet spot. Part of the reason we launched the L Suite brand was it gives us the ability, like Tech GC was the first community. Tech GC is now one community under the L Suite, but now we can create other communities, right? So we can create like for example, like we don't allow GCs of services businesses. So if you're like the GC of an insurance company or a bank or a financial asset manager, that type of thing, that's just not a good fit for our community right now. Like we're not going to be able to add a lot of value to it because there's members, we don't have members like, so we keep them on a waiting list, but like now we can start, whatever, we can start an insurance GC community and kind of curate those under this umbrella.
And when let's say if you're starting an insurance GC community, is that mean like you're starting a group chat within your forum, or it's like you're doing a series of events? What does it mean to kind of spin up?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that's what we're partly, I wouldn't say figuring out. I'd say we're trying to evolve that. So like right now, it is very event heavy. So like typically we start new communities with a series of dinners in the city, right? Like we'll start with density in San Francisco, New York, typically, unless it's, like a new end. So it was like biotech, for example, like we'd probably do that in like San Diego or something where most of that concentration is. But we'll start it with these events. I think what we're trying to do as our platform gets more mature is be a little bit more platform forward, like platform first. So how can we maybe put a lot of these folks in a curated community on our platform, help start some discussion there, help see it sort of seed, and then add events as like the next layer where we see traction. So we're in the process of that evolution, but so far it's more the former, like event first.
Totally. And how do you think about spinning up a new sort of C-suite? So for example, you got the CFOs, you got the 750. Let's say you were going to go to CTOs or CMOs or whoever. What are the key principles to get right to start a new one under this?
Yeah. So I think we kind of look at a few different things. So one is one is just like how well served this community is, right? So I think there are a number, like we got frankly just like very lucky. There were not really many like GC communities. Like that was a pretty interesting niche. And we kind of started that early and we built up some brand recognition. When we started the F Suite, there were a handful of CFO communities. There still are. There are a handful of like really good ones. But like we saw a sweet spot in the market, it was just like, that curation lens, like we thought we could bring something a little bit different to that. So, we've had some success in launching that. So we do look at are there, who else is out there and how saturated is that market? And even if it is competitive, do we have some unique value that we think we can bring to it, just knowing how we build communities and seeing what others do? Two, we look at the sponsor side of it, because sponsorship is such a big part of our model. You need these to be C-suite executives that have decision-making power and budget. So obviously every C-suite has decision-making power, but like there are different budget, right? Like if you're in like the CFO, everything comes across the CFO's desk, and the CFO has a lot of influence in the amount of spend. And there's a lot of different, sort of sponsors, whether it's accounting firms or fintech, that want access to the CFO and see them as a core buyer. Say the same thing with like CTO, right? Like that type of model, like there's a pretty deep, rich sort of ecosystem of sponsors that would want access to them and trying to demonstrate thought leadership. So that's something we look at a lot. And then I think it's it's sort of like the level of, I don't know how to maybe crystallize this, but we think a lot about the function that they are running and the complexity of it, in that would they want to be really talking to their peers to learn from them because they're dealing with really complex situations. I think that's, probably true in general across the C-suite, but like certainly more true for some functions than others. I think, like, for example, if you look at CMOs, there's a ton of like really interesting research, like really interesting content out there for them to consume and get smart on, and sort of like answers a lot of the questions. Could they benefit from talking to each other? Of course. But like, I think they have they're pretty well served in a lot of different ways. Whereas like that was not the case for general counsel. That was not the case for CFOs. I think that's, it's probably not the case for CTOs right now. So I think those are kind of like some of the factors that we look at as to what's more like.
Totally. And then in terms of the mechanics of, once you pick a category, are you then like, hey, we need to get some senior people in this category, we need to get some events going, and kind of, let's say, like CTOs, we're going to get maybe CTOs in crypto or AI or something at these hot companies, do events for them, and then grow from there? Or how do you think about the seeding of it?
That's right. I mean, we definitely think about, you've got to really like just like any startup, right? You've got to find like that core, like who's your ICP? Who do you think you can serve best? And really start small. I think like Y Combinator, Paul Graham was like big on some of this type of advice. Like you need to find like those like really early adopters and sort of like build something very curated for them. So we've taken different approaches from some of our communities. I think it kind of depends on which one we're starting, but whether that's like a certain company of a certain size, maturity, stage, or that is a particular industry and just like building deep within that industry. We're definitely seeing that when we started Tech GC, we were the core client, the core market. I mean, we were sort of building this ourselves, so it was a little bit easier. And we also like had pretty deep relationships in this ecosystem. And when we started the F Suite, it was the exact opposite. Like neither my co-founder and I are CFOs. Like I've never been a CFO. I don't know anything about it. It's like we really needed to build that with a core group of members. So we formed, a peer executive board, and these were the members that like really helped us start, right? Like a core group of founding members, and then a core group of sort of, sort of senior advisors, let's say, that were really helpful in thinking of like what's the right content, who are the right people to invite, how do we spark conversation on our forums, that type of thing.
Got it. So you go to other CFOs and say, hey, this is our CTOs, and say, hey, this is our founding members list. This is our advisory board. And maybe they get some benefits for being part of that or early group. And thus there's already a bunch of social proof that gets them excited in advance, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. And people are really interested in, I find the right people are interested in building a platform around themselves. I think some people already have a platform, and those people love to echo it, and sort of like other, they're used to this and they're seasoned. We find like there's a lot of others that are like, that don't have one yet and don't really know how to start, but like want one in a variety of ways. And I think if you can find those types of folks, like that's really valuable, right? Like that sweet spot of intelligent people that are willing to put themselves out there a little bit, but haven't yet found the way to do it themselves. So, we do think about that.
Yeah. And how does this help them? Wait, but do you mean like build a network, or do you mean like build their audience, or?
Yeah, build their own personal brand, right? Like being a bit of a thought leader within your community. If you could sort of like help spark some discussion, people like, we found this in the early days of Tech GC, like people divide. Some people don't like this, but a lot of people like really want to get on the speaking circuit. And though, like at this point, right, like we have a lot of GCs that come to us and say that, like, oh, I want to be a speaker at one of your conferences. How do I do that? We also see that of people that want to post more online and are more, sort of want to be a thought leader more in writing. So those types of things, it's helpful. Like we can help, you build your personal brand, which also helps us build our brand.
And you do that by sort of helping them build certainly their brand within the CFO or CTO community, but then also you say, hey, we have advice and talks on how to be active on social media, or how to can help you get on speaking. That's one of your value props, but
No, that should be though. It's something that has come up, but it's more. We're not like necessarily helping train you do that. I think we're trying to give you the platform to do it, and
the platform of other CFOs or CTOs.
exactly. And then also our social media, like we, at least on the L Suite side, like we've developed pretty big social media followings. Like we're able to help promote members and things like that. And you see that people, once you build that brand, being associated with that as a speaker or a conference co-chair has meaning out in the world.
That makes a lot of sense. How have you thought about pricing? Because it feels like you guys are offering a lot. I would have expected pricing to be higher. At the same time, you know, these things, if it's lower pricing, you can get more people in and get more better people in. And so, how have you guys thought about pricing?
Yeah, it's a great question. And this is something we think about a lot. And I think every startup does. And so we've thought about it probably pretty rudimentary, in a rudimentary way, like leading up to now. Like one, we started, like I said, it was like 500 a year. It's like successively increased over the years to 2,500 a year. What we're thinking about a lot now is how do we price based on, sort of like this willingness to pay model and just the value that we're providing. So everything from, there's two big levers. So we think about like one, just like the size and stage of the company. Like a public company can obviously afford to pay a lot more than a Series A company. And then two, the value prop of like, do you attend events or not? Because a lot of people maybe don't want to attend events, and therefore why are they, quote, subsidizing these events if they're never going to go? Or they might live in cities that we don't do many events, so they just don't have as much of an opportunity. So we are, soon going to be segmenting our pricing based on, somewhat along those two lines. Like, so more larger companies and later stage companies would have a higher price point, but they'd also be much more curated within those communities of like, just if I can get its public companies together, like there's a lot of value in that. And then two, depending on where you are or your event access, you might have a different price.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, one thing I saw Hampton do that was interesting, I think, maybe I imagined this, is I thought that had something like, hey, we're going to have a hard cap. We're starting the CEO community, but it's not going to get bigger than 750 or whatever it was. And I think that like inspires people of like, hey, it's always going to be at a certain cap, because the challenge of every community is I've dealt firsthand, and we all have, anyone who's in businesses, there's a tension to grow it because of, revenue. At the same time, the participant wants to make sure that they're at people at their level, and you can tier appropriately and stuff like that. But like, I'm curious how you think about it. Like if it's a CFO of a, 500 person company, they probably want to be around people at their stage. So for example, on our founder community right now, we do it based on, we have like different revenue tiers, that if you're this revenue tier, you go to this community. You're that revenue tier, you go to this community. And there are group chats for now. How do you think about like tiering appropriately?
Yeah. So I think it's going to depend on the community, because like revenue might matter for like the CFO seat more than the GC seat, for example. Maybe I'm not entirely sure, but I'd say what we are about to do in the L suite is tiered based on size and stage of company. So like what we find is like, there's never a perfect proxy for this, but certainly like what we see within the legal community, and we're seeing this within the finance community as well, is like when you are at a certain size of company, like a certain number of employees, as well as like a certain stage, which generally go hand in hand, like your problems are vastly different, and magnifying like the types of issues you are dealing with end up being much more similar. Like whether it's, whatever, we're pre-IPO, or hey, what worked as a 50-person company no longer works as a 250-person company, and all the challenges of scale. So we are dividing the community by stage of company, and thinking about, at roughly it's like early stage, growth stage, pre-IPO, and public.
Yeah. And so if I want to ask a question just of people at my, at public CFOs, Can I do that?
Yeah. So that's sort of like what's going to be the like the trick in the platform, right? Like, how do we create an experience where you feel like your core community is the people at your stage and size? Because, I mean, you're in the community business too. Like I think everyone has these same challenges of like communities as they grow just tend to get more junior, or that the more senior people feel like there's more junior people, and like that tends to dominate the discussion boards, and then they might check out, and that sort of degrades the quality of the community. Like we really want to keep people in that curated tier on the platform, and like understand like, hey, I'm here to be able to talk to who I consider true peers, and maybe to some extent a little bit people a little bit above me, but then also to some extent, how do I pay it forward to people a little bit behind me, and give you the ability to tap into that information broadly, but like have that core group that you ask your questions to.
Totally. And have you guys considered, this is a bit of a crazy question, but going after LinkedIn? Like if you get all the C-suite on board in your community who are loyal to you and you have all this information about them, how, how do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. So we have like a pretty, like we've got about a dozen product and engineering people on our team now. Our company is about 60 people, about a dozen or so are product and engineering. And like when we talk about this platform, and as we've like recruited more and more people, like we think about it as like LinkedIn 2.0 is like kind of like the quick nomenclature that we use. It is, it's pretty different than LinkedIn. I don't think we're not taking out LinkedIn anytime soon. But I think like LinkedIn has a really interesting value prop, and it's evolved a lot over the years. Like I'm a huge LinkedIn user. I love it. I think it's a great product. I actually think they've sort of gone in some interesting directions and waves, but like it's become more of like, it's a content channel, right? Like it's an online resume. Everyone goes there. You can see everyone's background, and like, it's pretty interesting content channel, and it's interesting for like recruiting and jobs. But like, I would say like no one is going to LinkedIn to like ask really challenging questions about how to do their job better, or to get advice on anything that might be sensitive. And I think that's where we're trying to play, is like that much more like, great, I might post my ruminations on LinkedIn, but like when I really have a question about, this X, Y, and Z thing my CEO asked, I'm going to like go to the suite, and I'm going to do that on the suite.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So 60 people. I mean, you said, 4,000, 4,100 lawyers, 750. So almost 5,000 paying members. If you said average cost is $2,000, and that's just on subscription, not to mention this, and you're making more money in sponsorships on subscription alone, that's like 10 million plus sponsorship is probably double that. So you're making, some pretty good revenue, and it's all bootstrapped. How have you thought about, should you fundraise at some point? Or because a lot of community based businesses are just thinking in general, like, hey, do I raise? Do I not raise? How do I keep it going? Did it require an initial loan? Transparency, I put 250K into Turpentine to get it off the ground as a loan. Not everyone has an extra 250K lying around. How have you thought about, sort of the funding of this business?
Yeah. I mean, we think about it a lot. I think, look, like we got pretty lucky in that both Kieran, my co-founder, and I were like, we had full-time jobs, and like this, we didn't start a business. Like we were able to kind of like start this on the side, and we were able to create real revenue. So at the point where both of us jumped on board full time, we had revenue, and like we were paying ourselves a salary. It wasn't a good salary. I took a major pay cut, but like we were able to do that without raising capital, right? So like we have grown from day one as a profitable company. And I think that has been a real blessing in that, like, we've never gotten ahead of our skis. We've never had to lay anyone off. We've certainly, like, everyone, if you talk to anyone on my team, everyone feels like any startup, like their hair's on fire. They're doing a million things. We're moving very fast. We're doing a lot. So people are very busy, but like, we're very measured in how we hire and grow. And I think that's like healthy for a company. That's obviously like what a lot of companies are doing now. And that's sort of been forced on a lot of companies in this new sort of economy. But I also think it's really, really important for communities, because we look at a lot of communities out there. I think there are a lot of successful communities, and there are a lot of communities that haven't been successful, or maybe the jury's out. And I think a challenge that a lot of them have is like, if you go for growth at all costs, like in a lot of ways, communities are anti-scale, right? Like you need to create that intimacy at scale. And if you lose the intimacy and it just grows, it becomes really dilutive, or, you lose your sort of senior people. And I think if you take venture money, you're on, like, venture is about growth. I mean, that is what venture is. And it's about growing really big. And I think that can kind of create some misaligned incentives for community companies. So I wouldn't, we don't need the money to grow. So I would say like, we're not raising money because we have to. If at some point it made sense to do that for a variety of reasons, I could see that being the case, but it would certainly not be something like we need to go raise 20 million bucks to go, hire a huge team and go really fast in some area. I think that creates real challenges in this ecosystem.
Yeah, it's really interesting. In some ways, I feel like Reforge should have went in your direction. I'm not close enough to the business to really understand, but they really had a lot of talent in their education business, and maybe they should have leaned more heavily towards the community side. I think they leaned more heavily towards the LinkedIn side, but it feels like you guys have really figured something out. The only thing I think about as like scaling new communities, and I'm sure you've thought all about this, is just the trade off. How much friction is there in the price? And if you're trying to get the best CTOs, your best CMOs, is there like, is the future of communities paid communities or free communities? Basically, is my question. As sort of it gets more saturated, as it gets crowded, just does free beat paid at some point? I think about the same thing with the founder community and versus Hampton or something. How do you think about sort of paid versus free?
Yeah, I mean, we've experimented with it quite a bit over the years, and I'd say from both our own experience as well as just like my observations in the ecosystem, I think paid beats free hands down. And the reason is, I mean, it's sort of like two big things. Like one, you value more what you pay for. I think even when we were finding a free community, we've also all just like we've experimented with things like someone else can pay for your membership or we'll give you a year free. And that type of stuff, like you just find people engage less. Like they engage less, they have less skin in the game, therefore they engage less. And if they engage less, they get less value, right? It's a lot like going to the gym. Like if you pay for it and if you don't ever use it, like I mean, you're going to get nothing out of that. You get what you put in. But two, I think what you find is like all of these communities, or I should say, the way we are building, like we really focus on C-suite executives. Like this is really about senior, experienced people getting value. And I think if you can create that environment where the senior experienced people come, that trickles down. Like then other people want to be there and they get value too. And the senior experienced people, like the free communities, are inherently noisy and inherently you're not putting that effort in. You're not sort of committing as much to it. So they check out. So I think you continue to see it. I mean, like YPO is very expensive. YPO has been around since what, like the 70s? Like I think you've got on the other end of the spectrum, there's like World 50, which is like $50,000 a year, or Vistage, which is tens of thousands a year. So I think those types of communities like are attracting the most senior C-suite executives of public iconic companies because they keep it really curated and you pay for that.
And maybe let's close on that. What are other community based or membership based businesses that you've admired or learned from? And what have you learned from that?
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, YPO for sure. Like we look at that one, like I sort of mentioned that a couple of times. I think they have been pioneer in that space. I think, there are like a couple like World 50 is a really interesting one. I think there's, some interesting stuff there. I actually was just listening to a podcast this weekend about the Summit series and like the founder of the Summit series and like all the stuff he has built on those communities. And then I'd say like, the couple in our ecosystem that we see all the time and have a lot of respect for are Chief. I think Chief has built fantastic, really, really aspirational, powerful brand, fantastic community. And Pavilion, I think Pavilion has sort of built an interesting community. I mean, you've built a number of communities and have followed sort of your path for a while and on deck and whatnot. So I think there's a lot of these models out there that are pretty interesting. I think, yeah, what Sam is building at Hampton, another interesting community out there. So I think there's a lot of different flavors there. I think there's, to me, like just different approaches of how people are sort of going after this. And, I think we're all, in some ways, like we need a community for community builders. I think there is communities out there for that, but it's like, we're all learning the same lessons, probably in different ways and a different scale.
Yeah. Totally. No, what you guys have done is really amazing. And as someone who's done that as well, or tried to do some elements of it, it's pretty amazing how far you've taken it, certainly further than we took it. In closing, for a bunch of media entrepreneurs listening to this, any plugs or any requests or any ways that if people are really inspired by what they heard, ways in which they could support this week?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, so right now we have two communities in market. So if you have a general counsel or you have a CFO or you are a general counsel or CFO or sort of like in-house in either of those areas, welcome to apply. This community it's an application or nomination model. So you can apply on our website, lsuite.co or fsuite.co or nominate peers. And then we're in the process of, seeding some other communities. So right now we're sort of like, we're starting to just do some CEO type dinners in New York, San Francisco, Boston. So if that's sort of within your sweet spot, we're really thinking about, for us, it's like venture backed high growth CEOs. Sort of this one to me is a lot closer to home. Like this is more like how we started Tech GC. Like this is, now Kieran and I are more in the founder seat and the CEO type seat, sort of thinking about building this and have all the same questions that we did in the GC seat, but like need that peer group of other people going through it. So if that resonates with you, and I'd love to invite you to come to one of our dinners.
Awesome. Well, Greg, thanks so much for coming on and putting a little bit of a master class as you're revealing behind the hood about how you guys have built this community business. A lot of listeners and myself included trying to do something similar in our own way. So thanks for sharing your wisdom. And again, it's been amazing to see what you guys have done. And I highly recommend listeners to recommend it to the relevant people in their lives to join these communities. I've talked to people who've been a part of it and they've had great, or who are a part of it, and they have great things to say.
So thank you, Eric. I appreciate it. And a lot of respect for everything you've built too.
Thanks for listening to Media Empires Season 2 and getting deep in the nitty gritty of building media, content, podcasts, newsletters, platforms, and intersecting products. We'll be back soon with Season 3. Until then, check out past episodes like Steph Smith, Yossi Levy, Zohar Khan, Craig Fuller, Greg Eisenberg, and Blake Robbins. If there's anyone you want to hear from in our upcoming season of Media Empires, you can let us know by emailing eric@turpentine.co.